Time is 6 p.m. Council City of Denison now convenes into regular session. Tonight's invocation will be given by Reverend Dave Pettigrew, pastor of Denison Baptist Church.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this group that's gathered here this evening, these dedicated public servants, as well as these concerned citizens. We pray that the discussion and decisions made tonight will go to make us better citizens, Lord, in this community as well as your kingdom, that your will be done tonight as it is in heaven. We'll be careful to give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda item number 2, consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, public hearings, 3A, 3300 block of North Juanita. Mr. Rex.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a request for a rezoning of approximately 5 acres located at the northeast corner of Juanita Drive and Route 84. The applicant, Jimmy Ray, is requesting to zone the property light industrial. He plans to construct some warehouses similar to what can be found on the other side of the street. On the March 10th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the rezoning. Mr. Ray is not available tonight. He had a death in the family, so he had to be taken out of town for that. Regrets not being here, but would like to proceed with the rezoning. Staff also recommends approval, and I can answer any questions you might have.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this agenda item? There being none, the public hearing is closed. Discussion from council.
Motion to approve. Second.
Have a motion from Councilman Brawley, second from Councilman Hanley. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 3B, public hearing on the 409 West Crawford Street. Mr. Rex.
Thank you. This is a request for rezoning of a 9,000 square foot lot located at 409 West Crawford Street. The applicant, Greg Guyman, will be opening a retail business. Therefore, he's requesting central area district zoning. It's currently multifamily. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval at the March 10th meeting, and staff recommends approval as well.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this agenda item? There being none, the public hearing is closed. Question from council.
Second.
Have a motion from Councilman Malvern, second from Councilman Scott. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 3C, public hearing on the northwest corner of US Highway 75 and FM 84.
Thank you. So request for rezoning of about 150 acres. The property is owned by the Denison Development Alliance, DDA. They're requesting to rezone to commercial in order to better market the property. No specific development is planned at this time, simply just a strategic rezoning, if you will. Mr. Tony Kai is out of town on business, so he's not able to be here tonight, but would like to move forward, and staff recommends approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval on this.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this agenda item? There being none, the public hearing is closed. Discussion.
Motion approved.
A motion from Councilman Hanley, second from Councilmember Adams. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 3D, public hearing on 106 South Houston. Mr. Rex.
Thank you.
Oh, and also 100 South Houston, I believe, right?
Yes, yeah, 100 and 106 South. The applicants are Michael and Linwood Smith. They're proposing to construct a loft apartment. In order to do so, they need to rezone a central area to accommodate that use. Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval of this at their March 10th meeting, and staff recommends approval as well.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this agenda item? Being none, the public hearing is closed. Questions from council?
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion from Councilman Gott, second from Councilman Hanley, all in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 4A, CDBG Steering Committee, restructure. Mr. Hollingsworth.
Mayor, members of the council, you have in your packets a proposed ordinance for the CDBG steering committee that changes the membership and reappointment and appointment process. Membership would move the committee from 7 members to 5 for this advisory group. The appointment and reappointment process would become more in line with some of our other boards and advisory committees. The city council would not need to nominate members for appointment as you have historically, but you would continue to approve the appointments made by the city manager. Again, staff feels this is a more consistent, more manageable process. The CDBG board is aware of the changes in this order. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion from Councilman Brawley, second from Councilmember Gott, all in favor by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 4B, Forest Park Project, Ms. Mackey.
Mayor and council, tonight we're here to receive a report, hold a discussion, and consider the proposed Forest Park playground design and funding of the project. The Denison Rotary Club has expressed interest in assisting to raise funds for this playground. In 2016, they will be celebrating their 100-year anniversary in Denison, and they would like to be a part of this addition to Forest Park. This concept design includes multiple play features for ages 2 through 12, a rock spray plaza, and a train-themed playground are just a couple of the unique ideas that we can add to the park. We would like to make this park a downtown destination, not only for our own citizens, but for visitors too. So we are looking for the council's blessing of the design concept. There will likely be changes according to what our funding is, but we want to start this process with being able to go out and try to see what fundraising and grant opportunities are out there. And the Parks and Rec Commission met on Monday, March 30th, and recommended approval to council. We are not requesting any funds, only to begin the fundraising process and grant opportunities.
Questions from council? Okay, thanks, Seth. Do we don't need action?
Need some discussion.
It would be, I think it'd be helpful and give some legitimacy to what we're trying to do with the community to have council support, not necessarily this design, because we recognize it may change, but certainly the concept of what we're trying to do here.
I think that Forest Park, obviously, with the investment this community's made in Forest Park, both with the school and the city over the last 2 years, it's critical that we finish it. It's going to take private help, such as the Rotary, to make something like this pull off. Just from a city priority standpoint, obviously, we can't spend those kind of dollars at one location at this time, but with private help, it should be good. So, any other discussion or motion?
Move for approval of the concept.
Have a motion from Councilmember Gott, second from Councilman Malvern, all in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4C, discussion of the Katy Trail project. Mr. Hodgerson.
Mayor, City Council, thank you. Staff is very excited to discuss this project with you all. We'd like to go over some of the details about the project. You can see on the presentation there, we have a regional view of the trail and how it coincides with a MPO-approved master plan for a pedestrian and bicycle trail. The red section shown is the proposed trail that we're looking to nominate to be selected for grant funding. The trail is 2.64 miles in length, beginning on the north end at West Day and going south along existing abandoned railroad right-of-way to just south of Spur 503. That particular graphic shows it ending on the south end at FM 691, which is going to be the future portion of the trail going through that planned development. Trail design will follow standard AASHTO guidelines. which propose minimum trail guidelines for pedestrian trails. The width is going to be between 10 and 12 feet, and it'll be constructed of concrete pavement. These were of particular importance with the matrix that we were given for the nomination process, how they look at our design and they score the applications for approval. Something interesting to note is this trail will connect with the Waterloo Park. And it will also continue once the trail is constructed south of FM 691, not shown here, but it will go into the downtown area of Sherman. So it does really propose a nice connectivity between the two cities. That is another key element in the nomination process that they were looking for, is connectivity of elements around the trail and interconnectivity with other cities. Other things to note, we will propose trail amenities of 14-foot wide pedestrian bridges. I think there are 2 locations in the preliminary design that we've seen that would need bridges, park benches, of course, and trash and pet waste receptacles. As I mentioned in the beginning, the MPO has met and approved a trail and pedestrian and bicycle master plan in October of 2014, and this project is one that was on that approved plan. Here is a trail perspective, kind of showing the concrete paved trail in relation to the vegetation around it. And the second perspective that we have shows a 12-foot wide, very typical trail section through there. Again, we're in a preliminary stage design. I'd like to cover, if you go to the last slide, we have some bullet items there I'd like to cover. We discussed the MPO plan. These funds are through the Federal Highway Administration, so there is some things that we need to be aware of if we are approved and we start administering the funds. TxDOT is the approved authority to do the administration of funds and also the approval of the project through a nomination process. This program is called the Transportation Alternatives Program, and it was formerly known as the Local Government Participation Program, which I, as a staff member, was project manager of in the city of Wichita Falls, where we constructed over $3 million worth of trails. It's a very nice program. The key element here is the funds are tagged for these kind of projects, hike-to-bike trails predominantly. With transportation costs rising, having these funds earmarked for that kind of project makes it very nice to be able to construct a project that costed this size, but it gives a nice element for a city to enjoy with the whole wellness aspect. To cover the amount of funds for our district, the Paris district, is $52 million, which will be dispersed over 18 counties. I have attended a training session for the nomination process, and I feel like our project has a very good success of being selected. Given its size, its scope, and the elements that it's connecting, and the dollar amount all fit very nicely in what they're trying to do when they select from a group of projects. Lastly, the nomination deadline is May 4th of this year. We have estimated the project cost at $2.5 million. This is a 80-20 participation program, so 20% would be the city's obligation. If the cost comes in at $2.5 million, then that would be $500,000. Now that cost is for design and construction. So what we're here today asking is for your approval for us to proceed with the nomination process. Obviously, if we are selected, then there will be a financial obligation that would follow. And if you approve of us proceeding with the nomination, we would ask that we have a public hearing on the April 20th council meeting where people can come and express their support of the project.
Okay. Discussion with the council?
What, in addition to $500,000 upfront money, what do we estimate ongoing maintenance costs to be on something like this trail system?
Sure, there will be some maintenance costs. This being through a railroad right-of-way, it won't necessarily have a turf established on either side. It will be more wilderness. So the nice part with that is it doesn't require weekly edging and mowing. There will be some weed control necessary, which we can incorporate into the general fund, general maintenance. The other nice aspect is, given that it's a concrete pavement, there is a longevity there where the pavement will stay in a condition that doesn't really require maintenance. With concrete pavement, you will have some joint sealants that with UV degradation and over time of expansion and contraction may need to be replaced, but we're talking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, depending on conditions. So it is no lie, there will be some maintenance. but I feel like it'll be negligible in the scheme of things. We can easily incorporate that.
The location of the two bridges that we're talking about, is one of them the Loy Lake Road crossing, and
Trying to remember, is that right?
Just south of there, it's closer
there's a
to.
creek just south of there.
The Deer.
Deer Run.
Well, yeah, Deer Run, Deer Lake.
Okay.
It's drains through that one near Teresa, I believe, as well.
So what is the plan for the Loy Lake crossing, Loy Lake Road crossing?
That bridge that was taken out,
Uh-huh.
we'll have to have a trailhead at the north end right there, but they'll have to be at a grade. There's no plan right now for a bridge to cross Northern Road.
So where's the second bridge?
It's, down at our creek. There's an existing rail bridge there, and we have the option of taking either the Teresa crossing or the park crossing if the rail crossing is not feasible. It's in poor shape.
So we will be continuing with traffic at the Loy Lake Road crossing. It'll be at that site.
We've talked about a net grade crossing, so as we can get from the regional park across Loy Lake Road to be on the trail.
It's not unusual to have crossings of that nature. On the Wichita Falls trails that we had 3 or 4 of those that we had to contend with. And driver familiarity is one aspect. There's also additional signage and additional striping that we did on those intersections with some bollards. We have signage for both the vehicular traffic and also signage for the pedestrian traffic.
Councilman Brawley, it may not be right at the creek in order to provide the visibility that you need. We can go further east or north into the park.
Where at Loy Lake are we talking about?
Down there by the armory.
Okay,
Is
that's
that
right,
crossing?
that's right, that's right.
You're coming off a steep hill is a concern.
Yeah, no, I
Safety.
know. We tried to get them to say that bridge before years ago.
Granted, the whole part of the design process will include looking at design alternatives for safety.
Questions?
I guess I've got a question for council. As far as, we worked on a 5-year parks plan, and we moved some money to kind of put Forest Park, get that part done, kind of bump that ahead of some things. I guess my question is $500,000 on this, or towards this, would that be above some of the other things that we talked about doing in that 5-year plan? Just as a question, I don't know the answer to that.
To me, and we have, in the visioning of the parks plan, the needs have been identified for for trails and
Right.
biking, so, I think typically it's a funding issue, and when you can draw down $2 million from the state.
Yeah, that's
So that's a high
5
priority.
to 1 on your money is.
That's it, and again, we constantly, I think the purpose of the master plan too, just what we did to reevaluate every year, and it's the
Right.
guidebook for the next 10 years of parks improvements.
I have been on the Katy Trail in Dallas many times. The one goes from SMU down, goes all the way, dumps out at American Airlines Center. And the amount of traffic that's on that is incredible. Every time I've been down there, and it's a really nice place.
We do have a couple of folks that have asked to speak to this agenda item. Wayne Manning, would come forward, please. Kyle, if you'll just kind of stand aside, please.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't name and address, please.
Yeah, Wayne Manning, 1829 Woodland Park. Yes. And I know the crossing that you're proposing there at the bottom of the hill, well, like that's a very busy street. I'd be concerned for my children coming off a hiking bike trail, crossing that right there. That makes a corner right there and you come out in steep grade, steep hill. That's dangerous. I grew up right there in that neighborhood. The other thing is he spoke about low maintenance. This track, my backyard, butts up to it. And I've actually cleaned the area out behind my house there. And it's ongoing. The brush and stuff just constantly just grows up in there. Where you're not mowing, it's going to be real tall, real quick on both sides of the proposed track. The other issue I have is safety for people that are in there. It's a very wooded area, very heavily wooded. I'd be real concerned if someone getting mugged or beaten or whatever through there. And then the other issue I have as well is, my home would be within, let's say, 50 feet of that proposed track. It'd be easy for someone to burglarize me, get on a bike and just ride off. And then we have another issue, and this is something that I dealt with Thursday last week, if I can present these around. You do have some snakes in there to contend with. That was one copperhead that I took out Wednesday, or last Thursday evening. That's a picture there. That shows out probably. And that's not the first snake I've seen in there. So those are my concerns with it, the safety of our citizens, my property being burglarized right there. This is, there. So, appreciate you guys hearing me.
Thank you.
If I may visit about to expound on the Wichita Falls experience, we had very much public involvement that talked about safety issues because the trail was coming through adjacent to properties. And while we understood their concerns, we pushed forward the project. It was a very good success. And what actually happened was the trail became an amenity to those properties. Some of the people that were in opposition were developers that owned vacant land and they were planning on developing, and they feared that it would cause some problem with their future development. And in the end, they were able to charge more for those developments, and it was an amenity that they could advertise for those properties. So while the onset seemed kind of ominous to those property owners, in the end, it was actually very benign. And as far as the right-of-way is already there, people can very easily go through there right now. What ended up happening was the trail would ended up, the users of the trail would police itself. And that is a very true thing, and trails around the trail users police the trail because they like having that, if you don't mind asking.
Council, how does the trail work at night?
Usually it follows standard park guidelines. If I'm not mistaken, some will close at dusk, is that correct? And that would be the same for the trail. Trail use would be posted, open at dawn, close at dusk. We can have police stations if you like. We've also talked about low lighting, but all those amenities drastically increase the project cost. And it's not unusual in some of your urban areas, but for a trail like this in a wilderness section, it would be maintained from dusk until dawn. Yeah. Start open at dawn, close at dusk. And with regard to the brush, once a month, once every other month, flat brush clearing would be acceptable and probably very much recommended so that it creates an open field. But it's not going to be established like turf would be.
Mr. Manager.
Yeah, the property on the east side of that trail that he's referring to, as far as being developed, that's in a flood zone. Anything that's developed there is going to have to be built up on stilts. I believe Betty Ann Strandland's, anyway, her brother built a house there and had built up on stilts. So chances of getting that developed for future homes would be real slim. It'd be extremely expensive to build in there.
Mayor, with the, with citizen concerns about safety, as I recollect, and this is something that I think, the Parks and Rec and Public Works have to get figured out. I mean, the Katy Trail in Dallas, pretty much every one of those homeowners has their property fenced off on the back. So we would, with access to the park. So I mean, I think that's a real concern we need to flush out and make sure that we have public involvement with folks that are there. Because as I'm recalling, as the gentleman was talking, they all are fenced with like gate access onto, which I do agree is an amenity. All of those homes are very sought after because of that. But we do need to strongly consider that and make sure we kind of know what we're facing, make sure the citizens understand what their options are and all that.
I'll make one more time. That strong amenity concerns me about taxes going up additionally. You're right, that's probably going to add value to my property. And I'm for anything that's good for athletics for our neighborhood. I wish we could take this $500,000 promotion and put it on this baseball complex that we're talking about, because we need the involvement, we need our children out playing. But again, I'm concerned with the tax rate going up there. It's quite high now with the high school being built recently.
We also have Joe Gray. Did your question get answered? Name and address, please, for the record.
Joe Gray, 1260 Elm Ridge Road. My question to you is this railroad track west of Teresa Lane or east?
Technically speaking, it would be east.
It's west of Teresa.
Is it west of
Teresa?
Teresa?
Teresa.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If it is west, and then that crosses our property, and we bought a section of that track from the railroad. So,
Where you're talking about here doesn't have any private property, right?
No, sir. We're stopping with what's already been under contract.
we are between 503 and 691.
Right, Joan, I think that the grant application wouldn't include the property that you have title to. It's just the property that we've recently purchased or will be recently purchasing from UP. The point, one of the things we want to accomplish tonight is to get council to say, we like the concept of this trail so that we have some legitimacy before we engage. There's half a dozen, four or five.
Yeah.
About half a dozen people that own segments of the right-of-way that we have yet to engage, and we need to engage, obviously. We cannot use these grant funds to purchase that property. And so the property we have purchased, we'll be closing on shortly, is UP property that we've already, about 85% of the alignment, proposed alignment, and then the other 15% is south, and it would include like you're one of them, but a half a dozen other property owners. We have yet to engage y'all, but we, with council's blessing of the concept at least, we hope to start that process soon.
Well, that was another one of my questions, if this was going to be an eminent domain type situation, or if you would be compensating us for the property that you would be using.
Even under an eminent domain situation, you're compensated, but my hope, and I think this community's hope, is that we avoid eminent domain. It's not really something that I think is a character in the city of Denison. So we would try to avoid that if at all possible.
Because the ultimate plan, though, is to go across our property, is the way I understand it from your.
Based on the line on that map, yep, yes.
But you haven't talked to any of us
Not yet, that's correct.
Okay.
Chief Burch, what would be the impact to have a periodic officer over there to our cost of officers in the police department here in Denison?
That would, I would assume, would fall under normal patrol like anything else. I understand the gentleman's concern about the, a system like this being in areas that may not be as wide open, but, looking at, I was just sitting here thinking, we've got the trail that goes around Waterloo that goes back in the woods very deeply, and to my knowledge, and I guess certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but 3.5 years I've been here, we haven't had any calls down there of persons being mugged, any thefts or anything like that. So, if this comes to fruition, we'll patrol it like anything else that we have in the city.
So we have the bandwidth now to handle that in some aspect.
Right now, we recently purchased an ATV with forwarded funds, and I would assume we would use something like that, not necessarily on the trail itself, but at least in the area.
Thank you.
Chief, I would assume too, if we move forward with this, you probably reach out to some of the other communities that have these type of trails to kind of figure out what kind of additional support you need or whatever to make sure those are safely patrolled, just like any other community's doing.
Absolutely, and the community I came from before I came here had an extensive trail system that the police were actively engaged in working.
Mayor, if I may make one more comment, it's just that I want to underscore the fact that this trail alignment has been on a regional thoroughfare plan for a number of years, and it's not something that we just cooked up on our own. It's been out there and has had public hearings on in the past at the regional level, and this is in furtherance of that plan.
Well, I think Sherman's still the same thing. These don't get talked about much because they're so expensive, and until federal or state funding becomes available, they start getting talked about. Mr. Mann, you have another comment?
Well, you talked about the patrolling, problems around
I
Waterloo.
need you to come to the.
he talked about no issues around Waterloo Lake. In a sense, it's patrolled because it's shut down at dusk. You have to be out of there. Yeah, quite, the residents know that if they're seen in there, they'd be escorted out of there. So unlike something that's gonna be wide open with access all along there, it'd be a little more difficult to patrol that area.
All right, so the public hearing's gonna be, public hearing's gonna be 2 weeks from now. Go ahead, I'll let you.
I didn't know if there's someone else on the list.
No, I think you're the, no one else is signed up, we'll let you.
Hi, Bill Legend, 23 Whispering Oaks, Denison, Texas. I'm very much supportive in the concept of this whole thing. I lived in Northern Virginia about 20 years ago and took advantage of the W&D Trail, which is a very extensive trail that goes in and out of DC. Obviously the devil's in the details, and you all know more about the details than I'm sure I do. But in concept, one of the things I'm sure you looked at is, A, the safety of that one intersection. I personally have seen, and sure done myself, avoided all the barricades and that sort of thing. When you're on a trail for any length of time, you ignore those things. So that street needs, that area, the Lower Lake needs to have a redesign, some other place, or a bridge, in my humble opinion. The real question is, I presume that we looked at other types of access to this area other than the front end and the back end, as well as what do you do when you finish the trail? Is there a plan to have bike trails, other parts that are safer or designated bike trail, or just simply turn around and go back? The other thing is the property values and the access to areas are very important. A bunch of things sprung up in Northern Virginia, from wineries to breweries to restaurants, and it really helped. Obviously, access to and the criminal element is important, but there's many more details to work out. So my question is, I presume there's more of a comprehensive plan than just a point A to point B, that we looked at other places to go once you've been there, as well as areas that we could purchase or landowners that would give access to it at other points in time, so you don't actually have to drive to the front or to the rear to actually use it. So I think I looked at the map, I couldn't really tell. That would be really important for the public to really take advantage of it, to actually go to the trail from your neighborhood, than to look at the front or the rear of it. So, thank you.
Okay, speak to that. We have had discussions about spurs to come off of the main alignment to connect some of the overheads and other amenities. Of course, that would be something that will fall into the original trail construction. I was remiss to mention, in Highland Village, there's a lot of trails that transverse through the subdivisions. And one of them crosses FM 2499, which is now a 2-lane, 45-mile-an-hour road, divided 2 lanes each way. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is they have a hike and bike trail crossing that, and they forced the user of the trail to be very cognizant of that crossing, because there was a physical gate that had to be opened and moved to cross. That is one option. As the gentleman just said, there's a lot of design that will have to be looked at and discussed and debated, but that is an option that can be done for that kind of high volume crossing.
So as clarification, if motion's approved tonight, and the grant is approved, so we are binding tonight if we're not. So if we get the grant, we can say no. Is that what you're?
Yeah, you can. You're under no what will happen if we get the grant, we'll have an advanced funding agreement with TxDOT. It'll be a whole process that we go through that actually says, okay, we're going to spend the funds, this is how we're going to spend it. At any one point in time, council could say, well, we're done with this.
Okay.
And really, I guess you don't actually have to have action tonight. We'll take action after the public hearing. Tonight is saying go forward with the public hearing.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarification. I misunderstood that. Okay.
Still a lot to discern there, so. Any other discussion?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. I actually got some telephone calls today about this, and they were 100% in support. So, just by way of information.
All right, we'll move that forward to a public hearing then on the 20th.
And I assume from that, we'll come back and we'll we'll discuss it again based on feedback from the public hearing.
Well, and I think we'll have to take action that night because the grant application has to be submitted, right?
Okay. All right.
Okay. Council now go into executive session pursuant to chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, specifically section 551.074 to discuss employment, evaluation, reassignment of duties in this one, and to hear a complaint against a public officer or employee. Time is 6:35.